Today's story was written by Reddit user Frame Late. I stepped into the elevator with my new companion, my mind buzzing. The mysterious male creature, for his part, seemed distant, eyes downcast, his body shivered, no doubt from the extreme cold he had just escaped from, and he kept running his digits through his hair as if it was habitual. I couldn't make heads or tails of him. He seemed like the type of creature a storyteller would create, tall and graceful, yet still very intimidating. Almost like the Nain or some of the Loan, but more impressive. The Nain were tall, beautiful and elegant, but were delicate in construction, like flowers wilting in the sun. The Loan were agile and spry like sandhoppers, but most wouldn't call them beautiful. They reminded people of the night creatures with their chitin, raptorial forearms, and segmented eyes, so much that the Loan natives of the killing fields could often blend in with the night creatures within their caverns, and even tame them as beasts of burden or war mounts. Thinking of the Loan made me shudder, but that was an unbecoming reaction. They were pleasant enough if you could get past their strange faces and language, and they traded exotic goods in exchange for salvage, weapons and food. He held out his hand to press the button that would take him back to the surface, but I reached out and gripped his hand to stop him. He glared at me, not in an angry way, but rather in a curious way.
"Why? We can leave now. I told you I can keep you safe."
I shook my head in frustration. "No, you don't understand. It's dark, it's bitterly cold, and there are monsters everywhere. It would be best if we waited for the moonfall to end." But he shook his head, obviously not convinced.
"They're no threat. I can protect you."
I huffed in frustration and hissed as pain flared up in my leg again, and I leaned against the wall for support. My new companion immediately leaned down, a look of concern plastered over his face, and noticed my bandaged leg.
"How hurt are you?"
he demanded, his voice seeping with authority. I merely barked in anger and pain, my cuts stinging. I almost had forgotten about my injuries, the adrenaline from me discovering the cryogenic pods and their last living inhabitant having masked the ache with anxiety and fear. It's just cuts along my skin," I hissed under my breath. "I'll be fine, I promise."
"You can barely stand," he hissed, before lifting me bridal style. "Maybe you were right. Maybe it is too dangerous for us to go up to the surface now. I can't protect you if you're unable to run. You'd be a liability."
The statement stung, but he was right. If I was in impassable shape when I went to the surface during the moonfall, I would surely die. I hated being helpless. It made me feel like a burden, or like I was troubling people with my uselessness. I tried to shrug off his advances, but I was too tired. Soon enough, he was holding me in his arms, bridal style.
"We'll look around for a bit and find a place where you can lay down and take a look at these wounds. Then you're going to get some rest," he said with a commanding tone. "Maybe there's still some rations somewhere down here as well. They probably won't taste that great, depending on how long they've been here for, but they should retain all their nutritional value, and that's all that matters."
I grunted, but I didn't say anything else. At least he wasn't insistent on going up to the surface during the moonfall anymore. I still hated him coddling me, but at least we weren't marching to our deaths.
"So why are you down here?" he asked me. "This isn't a safe place. It hasn't been for a while."
I'm a scavenger," I said. "I was hoping to find some good salvage to sell before the next moonfall. I hadn't anticipated the darkness to blanket the valley so early, though."
"And you mentioned this moonfall. Is it some kind of astronomical event? What causes the world to be blanketed in darkness, like you said?"
He pressed a random button on the elevator and it lurched upwards with a hiss and some horrible grinding sounds. I winced, but my new companion didn't seem fazed at all. "The moonfall is when the moons of our planet sink below the northern horizon, and the planet itself orbits around the dark of our own gas giant, or so I've been told," I replied. "I'm not much of an expert on it. All that matters is most scavengers like me, when the moonfall begins, you'd best be behind a set of strong walls or underground in a secure place, because the worst creatures on the planet crawl out of their dens when the light is gone."
"And that's how your leg got so torn up. You were almost caught."
I didn't say anything, but I'm sure he got the memo. He stopped talking for a bit before I started asking questions of my own. "What were you doing down here, all alone? Everyone else who was still left in their pods was long dead when I arrived." My new companion looked troubled, as if he didn't have an answer.
"I really don't know," he said. "I know that isn't a satisfying answer, but I'm being completely honest when I say that I well and truly don't know why I'm down here, or even what this place is. I don't even know who I am."
It took me a moment to process what he said. "You don't even know who you are? How? Is that a side effect from being in cryogenic suspension for so long? Do you just forget everything?"
"I don't know," he grumbled, eyeing me with annoyance. "All I know is that I woke up in this strange place and I met you. I don't know my own name. I have no memories of any family or friends, and I don't even remember why I was frozen to begin with. All of this feels so new to me. I'm sure I've never experienced any of this before, and yet it's all so familiar somehow, as if I was prepared for this. I don't really feel like I just escaped cryogenic stasis. With how little I know, I feel like I never existed before now, although that can't be right since someone had to have put me there."
It was the most mind-bending response I could have asked for, yet he sounded completely sincere. It was a chilling concept, waking up in a ruined facility with no prior memories. I don't know what I would have done if I had woken up in his shoes. "But how can you understand what I'm saying? At first you looked completely clueless, and then in a few moments you were almost fluent. That can't be normal, not even for the smartest individuals, even Mentems." Again, he remained silent, and he put up that same facial expression I had quickly become accustomed to. His eyes squinted, lips pursed, and brow furrowed, as if he was searching for an answer that didn't exist. Before he could respond, the elevator came to a screeching halt, and the doors opened to reveal another set of rooms lining a wide hall. This time, the floors were made from a smooth metallic tile, rather than the laboratory linoleum she found farther up, and the walls were sleek and featureless. My new companion hefted me up to readjust his grip on my body, causing me to grunt in surprise, and then he marched down the hall. "I can walk, you know. You don't need to coddle me like I'm some crippled whelp." My companion merely rolled his eyes. "Your leg is torn up, and I don't want to put any more strain on you than I need to. Besides, you're not that heavy for me." I didn't exactly know how to feel about the latter part of his statement, but I knew exactly how to feel about the former. "I can walk, damn it, now put me down." "No," he said firmly. I barked in irritation and began to squirm, hoping to escape from his grip. To my surprise, his grip on me was like steel. And no matter how much I struggled, I made no progress. Finally, he sighed and set me down, causing me to limp with a hiss of pain. "There you go. If you're going to be stubborn, then so be it. You're still going to lay down when I find something to eat." I limped along behind him, refusing to meet his gaze. Sure, I might have been petty, but being held by him in such a way felt wrong, even though he was being kind to me. It was against the Shodai way to be treated like a damsel, even by our own kinsmen. For a stranger to carry me in such a way was tantamount to calling myself, my family, and my entire town weak. I hobbled alongside him, his gaze never leaving me. We approached the door to the first room, and he activated the door to open. Inside was a room with a rusted steel bed frame that looked to have seen better days, lightly rusted steel furniture, and a mattress that seemed to be in surprisingly good condition despite their age, although they did have some wear and tear. My companion held open the door for me, and I trudged inside before sitting down in the middle of the floor with a huff, applying light pressure to my injured leg to relieve some of the pain.
I'll pull that mattress off that bed. If you can, look for some sheets in those drawers, or maybe that nightstand. He pointed at some of the worn furniture around the strange room. We'll talk about what comes next after we get you situated.
I nodded somberly and began to rummage through the drawers of the metal dresser pushed against the wall. Eventually, I found some thin sheets and a thicker quilt and draped them over the ratty mattress as my new companion easily dragged it off the bed frame and onto the floor. I sat back down and wrapped myself up in the quilt, shivering, and my companion leaned down next to me. "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. You could just leave me and escape yourself." He nodded somberly, eyes downcast as he diddled with his hands, cracking his knuckles absent-mindedly.
"Maybe, but you saved me, and I want to return the favour. And besides, it'd be wrong for me to just leave you here with a torn-up leg, especially if it's as dangerous on the surface as you claim."
A small grin formed on my lips. "So you finally admit that it's dangerous on the surface?"
"For you it is, but I'll be perfectly fine, I'm sure of it,"
he replied, his own small smile replacing his dour expression.
"I can handle anything the world throws at me."
"Even cryogenic pods?" I said snarkily, hoping to catch him off guard. He simply chuckled and shook his head.
"I guess that's my only weakness. Let's hope nobody figures that out and decides to use them against me."
I rolled my eyes with a giggle and imagined some Nane or Mentum lord bonking him over the head with what was left of one of the cryogenic pods, like the world's most unwieldy bludgeon. Somehow, I had a feeling that would end poorly for his assailant. "But really, you don't remember anything? No name, no family, no home? That's really unsettling." He nodded.
"Nothing at all. It's strange because I'll be looking at a wall or an object or something mundane, and I will know exactly what it is and what it's meant for. I don't know how I know or why I know, but I know what this place is just by being here, and I know why it was built, more or less. It all just rises from the ether of my mind with no explanation. It almost feels like I was prepared to know what it was, as well as its original purpose."
"And what was it used for?" I asked, hoping to find some explanations.
"It was a cryogenic storage facility for the wealthy and their servants, named Urbis's Fleeting Embrace. It was supposed to be sealed for only a few hundred years, but something went wrong, horribly wrong, and I'm sure you sensed that if you inspected the pods before you freed me. They suffered a cavalcade of irreversible and catastrophic errors in their function that ultimately led to a slow and deadly thaw stage, which should theoretically be impossible. These cryogenic pods were built to last for hundreds, if not thousands of years with minimal maintenance and supervision." I shrugged, but I could tell just by the tone of his voice that he was running scenarios through his head, just like my father would when he was inspecting one of the malfunctioning devices we needed on our homestead. "Things go wrong and systems fail. Nothing's perfect." He shook his head assuredly. "Not this time. Every single pod that malfunctioned contained an elite. In fact, every elite that was preserved here died from the same cause, a failed thaw process that led to rapid cell death and necrosis, all at exactly the same time. The odds of that happening all at once, with their secondary and tertiary power systems in place, and the individual batteries housed in each pod, is so astronomically low, it's practically impossible. No, someone, or something, sabotaged the pods in such a way that killed the influential elite and left their servants unharmed, to be released at a later date. It was sophisticated and very much a preemptive act to take them all out at once." The idea was horrible and dishonourable, something a coward would do. Who would want to do such a weak and spineless thing, to kill so many people in such a way? What was there to gain from all this death, especially if it was selective? "Power, or maybe the disdain of it," he said abruptly. "These elites, I know for sure that they all had enemies, maybe each other. I'm sure once they had awoken that they would have restored their former spheres of influence and wealth. and then began to squabble over who got what. Maybe another noble wanted to prevent them from seizing power, or maybe a relatively tech-savvy prole was sick of the elite being able to weather whatever storms they most surely caused without consequences, and decided to take matters into their own hands. I don't know the who or the why of it all, but I know the how and the when.
Doesn't that trouble you, that someone would so quickly murder so many others in cold blood? I asked him, my voice wavering a little. He seemed so detached from the tragedy, like he expected it.
I don't know how to feel about it. What I will tell you is to not pity them. They would have gladly done the same to each other and an infinite number of others if it meant they could grasp at more power, wealth, or control.
And how do you know that? Did you know them personally? I thought you said you didn't remember anything, so how could you know that about them? He paused for a moment before he responded, his eyes downcast towards the floor. He leaned on the wall and sank to the ground, obviously in deep thought.
I don't remember any of them, but I swear that deep down inside of me that I know that everything I just said was true. I feel like it was ingrained into me, that these people were monsters. It feels like instinct, yet more profound.
His words definitely resonated with me. I knew what it felt like to be so sure of an instinct, although your instincts were vastly different. Even though I might not know what was particularly wrong with the machine, I knew for certain that it was either broken or in working order, and that a specific kind of problem was occurring, if any at all. His instincts seemed so strange to me though, and it felt so uninstinctual that it almost seemed more like general knowledge, or maybe selective rhetoric that was imprinted on his psyche rather than anything instinctual. But then another detail began nagging at me at the back of my mind, something I had been dying to know since the moment I discovered him. You said you know how and when, so that would mean you would know just how long you were in there, right? He closed his eyes and thought for a moment, as if he was crunching numbers. Then he grimaced, to which I winced. It's been a long time, hasn't it? I asked, hoping to find out the exact length of his captivity. He opened his eyes, his lips pursed and his eyes almost wild, like how someone would look upon finding out about the death of a loved one.
It's been 14 millennia. I've been trapped in that pod for a little over 14,000 years.
My new companion quickly left after revealing how long he had been trapped, saying he needed time alone, and that I needed to get some rest. I wanted to argue that he didn't need to coddle me and that I could help him, but he wouldn't have any of it. He made sure the door was closed and locked so I'd feel secure, but I had a feeling it was just as much of a way to make sure I didn't wander off as it was to make sure I was safe. Either way, I couldn't sleep. This place made me uneasy despite being locked away in a safe, warm room, like some presence was watching me, but from all directions. I couldn't shake the feeling, so eventually I simply pushed down my anxiety and forced my eyes to close, thinking of mundane things until my brain slowed down and I drifted to sleep. I couldn't remember how long I slept, most likely a few hours, but when I woke up, my companion was sitting down, his back leaned against the wall. He had a few metallic bottles of something I couldn't quite identify, although it smelled bitter, and a few packages of food that I didn't recognise. I sat up groggily and rubbed my eyes with a grunt, the pain in my leg throbbing, albeit a little less than before. Ugh, what are you drinking? It smells like hot tar. He chuckled and took another sip of the disgusting liquid.
Coffee, the good stuff too, none of that artificial junk.
That doesn't explain why you're drinking it in the first place.
He shrugged. I needed something to help clear my head, and coffee will do that. Everyone drank it where I'm from, even the nobles, although the proles had artificially flavoured junk, and the nobility drank the good stuff they grew on the untarnished garden worlds.
I thought you said you didn't remember your past.
I don't, he replied. I just know that to be the case. It's common knowledge, not something personal.
The idea that anyone drank such a disgusting thing, much less everyone, seemed unreal. But I wasn't going to question my new companion. Maybe his kind was just weird. Either way, I was more interested in the term garden world. What's a garden world? Is it like a world dedicated to gardens or something?
He chuckled. No. Well, maybe. Garden worlds are worlds dedicated to overgrowth. They can be resorts with pristine beaches and controlled flora and fauna, massive planet-spanning plantations, or even places to house exotic or endangered species. Some were just small backwater planets, or moons of gas giants that rich magnates or nobility transformed into their own personal estates, with sprawling palaces and entire cities dedicated to maintaining every aspect of the natural wonders that exist there. Everything is shaped and modelled to be aesthetically pleasing to the eye, like a fantasy.
That sounds really wasteful, I said. Cool, but wasteful.
It really was, but it was one of the few ways to flaunt wealth, and so the rich did it.
It seemed unimaginable to me that someone could transform an entire world into a picture-perfect escape. My mother already had a hard time preventing the nush weeds from choking out her beloved spice and herb garden, which was only a few yards long and wide. It must have taken magic or technology so advanced that it basically was magic to do something like that. The kind of technology the Naindrick shepherd spoke of when reminiscing to his scattered flock of believers. I would sometimes hear about it on the radio in the taberna when the townsfolk wanted to have a good laugh at his expense. I always thought the Nain were crazy, but now it seemed that maybe they weren't crazy, they just remembered.
I should stop distracting you for now. He slid one of the open packages over to me. It was filled with what seemed to be dried fruit and other things I couldn't recognize. Eat something. Then we'll see if you can walk. We're not going to stay down here forever.
How long was I asleep?
12 hours and 37 minutes. How long does this moonfall last?
It should be over in about another 2 or so hours. It lasts about a day every few days, and a day is 18 hours here.
And why did you even come out here during this moonfall if it was so dangerous anyway?
I sighed in irritation. I just wasn't paying attention to the time. I thought I could scrounge for some salvage before the moonfall began. I didn't think I'd get caught out here. I grunted and refused to meet his gaze. I didn't like the fact that he was correct. I was told from a young age to never go wandering about right before a moonfall, since that was how many young salvagers and traders died. You had to plan everything around guarding yourself against the moonfall and not becoming a victim of it. I broke that core tenet yesterday and decided to slip out of the house with less than a day to spare. But we weren't doing well financially. I was hoping to be able to find some extra salvage or scrap that could be sold before we had to hunker down for the moonfall. The cold season was coming, and the world would be blanketed in frost for a few months. Salvaging was hard then, as was doing anything outside, and even with my thick fur, the biting cold had a way of seeping through your fur and deep into your bones, like the jaws of an angry predator. We needed everything that we could get, and then some. Sure, we had a little farmstead and a decently sized patch of land, but even then the soil had little to give. We ate what we could grow from the soil, and thus we had to somehow acquire everything else with the income that me and my brother brought in. My brother would be back in a few weeks from his stint as a caravan guard crossing the Scar, and I was the only one fit to work as a salvager left. We're poor. I need to help my family.
Being dead isn't helpful to them, not to their hearts nor their wallets.
You don't think I know that? I hissed at him, my pupils narrowing in anger and my hackles rising. We don't have much, just enough to get by. Some years are better than others, but this one wasn't, and I'm not going to let my family suffer, and I'd gladly risk my life if it meant alleviating some of their hardship down the line. He was quiet for a moment before responding.
But that's not what they would want, is it? You can't just risk everything for them when all they want more than anything else is to make sure you're safe."
I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. I knew he was right, but I hated admitting it. Partially because I hated that he was correct, and partially because I knew I'd get the same earful when I went home, except for the fact that my father would undoubtedly keep me at the homestead for a week or two as punishment, and stars forbid how my brother would react when he found out. Part of me loathed going back because I didn't want to face my father's disappointment, but I had to. The idea of him being convinced that I'd died a horrible death out here in the killing fields was far worse than any punishment he could dish out. Not to mention how it would break my mother's heart. They would never forgive themselves. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of my companion's voice.
"We should leave soon. How's your leg?"
"Better," I replied. "The pain is dull, and I think I can walk on my own."
"Good," he said. "Eat and we'll leave soon. I just want to make sure you can walk. Where do you live? How far away is your home?"
"I don't know how far we are from my homestead. Maybe about 20 or so kilometers. It's a long walk through the ravines and the killing fields."
"Then we should start once you're finished. Eat up, then we'll leave."
"Wait, what about the rest of the facility? There's got to be something valuable here."
"I searched most of the important floors while you were asleep. The place was picked clean centuries, maybe millennia ago. The surviving servants of the nobility who were housed here probably took everything of value when they left. I'm sure you could probably take apart some of the machinery that's left here, but that would take time, days maybe. You need to get home soon so the cuts on your legs don't get infected."
My heart sank. Sure, I had some leftover machinery, but nothing of note. It would be enough to have some extra spending money, but it wouldn't be the excess of money she hoped would cushion her punishment just a little. Still, it was better than coming back empty-handed.
"Chin up,"
he said, probably noticing my bad mood.
"We could come back here and find some more valuable salvage another time."
"Yeah, I suppose." As we rode the elevator up to the maintenance tunnels, my heart beat at 1,000,000 miles a second. It was crazy, leaving during the moonfall, but my companion's confidence was so unshakable that I was beginning to believe that he could keep me safe in the oppressive darkness of the surface. I leaned into him, my arm wrapped around his neck for support, and his own on mine. He didn't seem to mind the contact, only worried about whether I was okay or not. It was a refreshing sentiment, something that was hard to find out in the world. I hoped that he wasn't just naive and that he would always be like this. Despite my reservations about being coddled, it was nice to have someone who simply cared about other people around, and his kind-heartedness was infectious. As the elevator creaked upwards, I thought about the trek home. It would be long and difficult, at least half a day through the ravines and across the killing fields. But I needed to get home. I needed to sleep in my own bed, to see my mother and father again. I often yearned for freedom when I was stuck at home, but in all honesty, I preferred to be at home than out salvaging, even if I cherished the privacy it afforded me. Finally, the elevator reached the entrance floor, and the doors slid open to reveal a large room with a pneumatically sealed entrance. Rust was everywhere, and it was obvious that the entrance had it a lot worse than the rest of the facility, probably because it had to weather 14,000 years of decay and erosion. My companion assisted me in reaching the far end of the dimly lit hall, where a control panel stood. He flicked a few switches and the hazard lights blared, alarms ringing. The massive door at the end of the room began to slide open with the shriek of aged metal against metal, probably alerting every night creature within a kilometre of us, and causing the sandy wind to pour in from the outside. It was dark outside, but brighter than it usually would be during the apex of the moonfall. That must have meant it would be coming to an end soon. The air was dry and cold, but not bitterly so, like when the bright dusk shined with all the lights of the gas giant, and it reflected all of the luminosity down onto the surface. Still, it seemed dark enough for the night creatures to wander, and I didn't fancy being eaten today. My companion helped me out through the gigantic entrance, and we were hit with a gust of icy wind that made me shiver. My companion didn't seem fazed. Instead, his eyes were glued to the gas giant above. It was faint, but slowly the moon itself was peering out from the dark side of the gas giant, just enough for the vibrant, beautiful rings to shine, and an aurora to erupt in the sky. The moon's co-orbital sibling, along with some of the smaller moons, began to rise up from the south, oppositional to the co-orbital body. We trudged out into the sands, and my companion set me down gently on a flat rock, his eyes upward and a smile plastered on his face, a bright smile like that of a joyful child. He spread out his arms as if he was venerating a god and sank to his knees, his skin glowing. It wasn't a faint glow either. His skin seemed to be generating its own light, like a giant fire was burning in his chest. I noticed a bundle of feelers in the distance retreat across the dunes, probably a night creature that was dissuaded by my companion's unnatural glow. I stood up and limped over towards him, his artificial glow casting light across the dunes and the ravines. He looked at me, and then up at the gas giant again. "It's good to finally see the sky," he said dreamily, "although I've never seen a sky quite as beautiful as this." I cocked my head to the side, and he laughed at my curiosity. "I'm sorry, you must be so confused. I'm just not used to seeing such beauty. Everything was different where I'm from." I nodded, and then gestured west. "We should head out soon, if we want to get back to my father's homestead before it gets darker again. It won't be another moonful, but the night creatures become bolder the darker it gets." He nodded and rose to his feet, his eyes still glued to the sky. I then asked him a question I had forgotten to ask until now. "What do I call you, now that you're going to be staying with me for a while?" He looked back at me, confusion plastered on his face. I simply snorted and limped beside him. "My father won't just let you wander off without a place to stay after you saved my life. He'll feel obligated to repay you." "It's not necessary," he responded. "I can take care of myself." "My father doesn't care. He'll insist on it." "Is your father as stubborn as you?" he asked with a growing smirk. "He's worse," I replied. "Somehow, I think that's impossible," he said, causing me to roll my eyes with an amused grunt. "As for my name," he said, eyes once again following the beautiful ring surrounding the gas giant, "call me Saturn."